Thank you. I am so happy to be with you all today. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It feels so good to be here. You know, back when everybody was saying, who the hell is Pete Buttigieg? The Sheet Metal Workers Local 20 were among the few people returning my phone calls, and I'll never forget it. I want to thank all of you for having me here. Thank you, General President Michael Coleman. Thank you, General Secretary Treasurer John Daniel. Thank you, Transportation Division President Jeremy Ferguson, who we worked with so hard to get those results that we're celebrating today. General President Emeritus Joseph Sellers, with us in the fight for the bipartisan infrastructure law. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to all of the transportation presidents, all the locals, everybody here. I couldn't be more excited to join you. My name's Pete Buttigieg, and I have the best job in the federal government. Not that it doesn't have its headaches. Every job does. But I have the enormous privilege of working to help shape the transportation systems that we are going to count on for the rest of our lives and the rest of our kids' lives. Every day, under the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Harris, I get to work on improving the safety and function of every form of transportation in our country. And I experience the thrill of knowing that I am helping build the future. You all know that same sense of responsibility and that same rewarding feeling of making things happen that are going to make a difference. I feel like also being here in Las Vegas right now, like I'm going down memory lane, because this weekend we celebrated our twins' 3rd birthday. It was, thank you, yeah, I'm going to applause for that. It was 3 years ago exactly. I was sitting on a plane getting ready to taxi to go to Las Vegas that I got a phone call that changed our lives. The next day, we were holding them in our arms, about 5 pounds each. So it's hard to believe now they're already big enough to start asking questions about my work, which they really do. My daughter, every time when we put her to bed, after, if you have toddlers, you know how this goes. You do the story, the bath time, and then the pajamas, and then you do the story, then you do the other story, and then you do the stuffies, and then you put the blanket on. Then you check for monsters, then you turn the lights off, then you check for monsters again. And then just before she goes to sleep, she says, "Tell me about your work." I asked her one time, like, me talking about work helps you go to sleep? She goes, yeah. So I do. And you know, sometimes my work doesn't exactly translate into terms a 3-year-old is going to care much about, congressional committees or hiring process, but then sometimes what we do is so abundantly important that it makes sense even to a toddler. So the last time I was packing my bags for Nevada back in April this year so I could come here and break ground on Bright Line West, I got to tell her I'm going out to be with some people who are going to make a fast train in the American West. And Joe Sellers was there, Jeremy Ferguson was there, Peter Kennedy was there, a whole bunch of you were there as we celebrated not just what that's going to mean for American transportation, but the good-paying union jobs that was going to create. Building a train like that gave me a good answer for my kids about what I do all day. It also gives America a good answer for our traveling public who keep asking why we can't have high-speed rail in this country, why we can't have more trains more quickly. Also gave me a good answer for my boss who keeps asking me the same thing. Up until this administration arrived, the questions kept swirling about why we can't have nice things, why we can't have high-speed rail, why almost none of the world's best airports are in the United States, why our roads and bridges were falling into disrepair, why our ports were struggling to keep up, why public transit wasn't serving everybody's needs. And the simple answer is, that was a choice. Every time America missed a chance to do big things in infrastructure, the backlog got bigger, the hole got deeper. And every time somebody made a big promise on infrastructure, and then failed to actually do it, like we saw just a few years ago, the impatience began to turn into cynicism about the ability of Washington to get anything done. But from the first days of this administration, we set out to change that. And now, here in year 4, The money is moving, the dirt is flying, and America's future is changing before our eyes. And you are making that happen. Take that high-speed rail again. People in this room will be vital at every step of the project, from the members of Local 88 who build the rail facilities to the transportation workers who are going to be conducting trains from Las Vegas to LA. The Biden-Harris infrastructure package is at the core of America's economic future, and your members are at the core of this work. As you knew you would be if we could get that bill passed, which is why you helped us get this done in the first place, and I'm here to thank you for that. You stood with us when we were pushing so hard to get this done. And make no mistake, it was hard to get done. People talk about it now like it was easy, like it never would have been any other way. This infrastructure bill, as if it was certain that it would have passed. Don't let them forget that we spent our first year pushing. Don't let them forget that time and time again, in the months before President Biden signed that bill on the South Lawn of the White House in November of 2021, people said it would be impossible. Commentators wrote the political obituary of that bipartisan infrastructure law half a dozen times before it got done. So there's no way President Biden could get this done in today's Washington. Certainly no way you could get it done on a bipartisan basis. But we stuck with it, you stuck with it, and together we made it happen. There doesn't have to be a blue versus red death match when it comes to American infrastructure and transportation. There shouldn't be. No such thing as a Democratic highway or a Republican bridge. These are just the foundations of everyday life that Americans depend on to get to work, to take their kids to school, to visit their parents and grandparents, just to go get something to eat. And fortunately, a number of Republicans in Congress recognized that not everything needed to be a political battle and were willing to cross the aisle, sit down with Democrats in Congress, with cabinet members like me, with President Biden and Vice President Harris, and we got that infrastructure law done. But it would not have made its way to the president's desk without the support of the people in this room. You stood up, you made clear that the legislation was something this country needed for everyday life and for our long-term economic growth. You did so knowing that if we got this bill through, we wouldn't just be building railroads and bridges. We'd be building livelihoods. Good-paying jobs that mean presents under the tree, a new car or truck in the driveway, and everything else a family needs. Smart members and locals stood up for this bill, and I was proud to stand with some of you that day on the South Lawn of the White House as President Biden signed the bill into law. Now for the tricky bit. The thing that I wake up every morning thinking about and you wake up every morning making happen. Delivery. Now that the funds are flowing, you are showing up in ways that are going to decide the success of America's infrastructure decade. Recruiting and training and deploying the workers who are getting the projects done, who are building the structures that are going to carry us into the future, who are operating and maintaining the trains and buses that carry people across their days, making sure that freight and goods keep moving across this country and keep our supply chains strong, and so much more. So again, thank you. There's a lot of good work happening right now, so what I want to do is just give you a brief update on where it all stands. Bottom line up front, America is building like we haven't built in more than 70 years. There are now 60,000 projects and counting getting support in every one of America's states and territories because of this infrastructure package. We're calling it the Summer of Construction around US DOT headquarters and Navy Yard, and I've been touring projects happening all over the country because of the Biden-Harris administration and because of you. In Montana, I was with sheet metal workers who were working on the Missoula Airport project. I don't know if we have anyone from Local 103 in the house. That was a really impressive project to see. In Iowa, I was with Local 263, building up the Eastern Iowa Airport. Thank you for your work on that. The infrastructure package provides a record investment in airport construction. And a lot of that, by the way, is HVAC. In North Carolina, we broke ground on the new Raleigh to Richmond passenger rail line. Pennsylvania, we celebrated $5 billion going toward repairing, restoring, or reconstructing more than a dozen of the nation's largest, most economically significant bridges around the country, including that I-83 South Bridge in Harrisburg. In Southern California, we broke ground on the new on-dock rail system that'll serve the port of Long Beach, which means the busiest port complex in the U.S. will be able to move even more goods every single day. And our Deputy Secretary, Polly Trottenberg, has been part of that roadshow as well, touring projects that are transforming the Northeast Corridor passenger rail line, like the new Hudson River Tunnel and the Susquehanna River Bridge. We got over $1.4 billion now going to dozens of rail projects across the country to upgrade freight rail and passenger systems. Another $343 million to retrofit some of the country's oldest and busiest transit systems and rail systems, things like elevators and ramps, to make them more accessible. Earlier this month, we announced $5.1 billion in funding to go to extending BART service into San Jose and Santa Clara, which will help put Local 104 members to work for years to come. Just a few weeks ago, we announced $1.5 billion to upgrade transit buses across 47 states. Modern, zero-emission buses also manufactured by American workers. In Los Angeles, I toured the Metro Division 13 bus facility. I spoke to the operators and mechanics there about their new fleet. And as the focus of the Summer Olympics shifts from Paris to Los Angeles, those buses are helping LA get ready for the 2028 Olympic Games that are going to make us all so proud. And the common thread through all of those projects, so many of which smart members will build and operate, is that they are making everyday life better. First for the workers building them, and then for the workers and users who will count on them every day. That's what we're doing through the infrastructure package. I want to share a little bit about the ways in which the Biden-Harris administration is proud of being the most pro-union administration that we've seen in decades in this country. When it comes to support for union workers, recent experience has shown us the difference between administrations that talk the talk and administrations that walk the walk. Literally, in the case of this president, as you saw, the first ever to walk a picket line in solidarity with American workers on strike. One of the best parts of my job is meeting with apprentices and workers earlier in their career, like the ones I met at Local 20's training facility in Indianapolis, who talk about how union jobs changed their lives. I met a trades apprentice in Washington State preparing for the work ahead on the I-5 interstate bridge replacement there. Talked about how he is sure that if he hadn't found that union after separating from the Marines, he would have wound up as a statistic. I met a working mom who said that the difference this work was making was the difference in whether she would know her own children because of the commute she used to have to take just to travel and find work. And then I think about a trip we took to Wisconsin where students from around the state were invited to see for themselves what a future working in construction could mean to them. The difference between what they might have pictured a construction site was like and what it would actually mean, and the wages they could be earning in a good union career. It was news to a lot of those kids, but you know it well. A single good union job can change the trajectory of an American life. And a single project can support hundreds, sometimes thousands, of those good union jobs. So you multiply that by the 60,000 projects going on around this country, and it can change the trajectory of generations. Right now, together, we are building a future for America for what I know you at SMART have been calling accurately the infrastructure generation. And yes, it's through the projects we're doing, the job creation we have underway, but it's also the policies that back up American unions and union workers. And again, not unlike the infrastructure bill itself, you see the difference right now between talk and action. Here's what action looks like. We got serious about Buy America rules that are stronger than ever thanks to the Biden-Harris administration. Anyone getting taxpayer dollars for infrastructure needs to be building with American-made steel and iron and construction materials. We got serious about prevailing wage. For the first time in 40 years, comprehensively updated the rules around prevailing wage on federal construction projects, meaning that upwards of 1 million construction workers are getting a raise, a well-deserved raise, I might add. We got serious about the pension plans. After years of concern and even more years of talk, this administration took action. We're also working alongside unions to bring more people into the trades who don't necessarily have a family background in these good careers. Our workforce hubs are a big part of that. So are you. Partnering with us to make sure there are more jobs on projects for people who live in the communities where the work is happening. Because you understand that unions are at their most powerful and unifying when their membership reflects entire communities. And I definitely want to lift up our work together and your leadership on safety. In April, our Federal Transit Administration issued a final rule to make public transit safer and better protect public transit workers, including giving these essential workers a voice in safety decisions. And then, after a lot of anticipation and a lot of work, a rule that was developed 2 administrations ago, frozen by the last administration, that we knew in this one we had to get done. This spring, our Federal Transit Administration issued that long-fought-for rule for safe train crew sizes, establishing what most Americans already thought was the case. What most Americans, all Americans, ought to know is common sense, which is a 1-mile or 2-mile or 3-mile long train ought to have minimum crew size requirements to make sure everybody on that train is safe and everybody who lives anywhere near where that train is going. You helped make that happen. You drove that for years. And I was proud to be with President Ferguson when we announced that rule. That is what the power of organizing and good policy working together can do. And it is good policy. We know there's more to do, but these are the kinds of gains that we can score when we work together. We have final rules to require emergency escape breathing apparatus for trains carrying hazmat. We conducted 7,500 focused inspections, issued safety advisories, developed a new rule to require those railroads to provide real-time information for local first responders when something happens. And I promise you, we are not walking away from the fight for sick leave until 100% of railroad workers have that sick leave. When we got here, less than 1 out of 10 Class 1 union freight railroad workers had access to paid sick leave. We have pushed hard on that, and today the number stands around 90%, from just 5% to 90% in less than 2 years. And again, we will not stop until it's 100%. Working together. We will continue to do everything in our authority to set higher standards to protect workers and the public, to upgrade and modernize our rail infrastructure, to make operations safer. I know there's still more to do. A lot of it requires new authorities from Congress, which is why I have been demanding that Congress finally pass the Bipartisan Railway Safety Act to make tracks, cars, and working conditions safer for those who work on freight rail and everybody who lives near a railroad line in America. And I know you've been fighting for that too. So thank you for standing up for that important legislation. We got so much to be proud of, and we got so much more to get done. But the biggest reason that I'm glad to be joining you today is that you understand in your core what politics and policy is actually about. Not personality contests, not power for its own sake, not some kind of gotcha moment or parlor game or horse race. It is about our lives. Everyday life in America, and how it gets better or it gets worse depending on the decisions that are made in our halls of power. That's our focus as an administration, inside and beyond the transportation sector. You see, in healthcare, fighting and winning to get the cost of insulin for seniors from about $400 a month to $35, to make hearing aids available over the counter, to get Medicare to negotiate drug prices. You see, in consumer protection, standing up for airline passengers and for credit card holders, for all kinds of consumers, taking on junk credit card fees, overdraft fees, unfair non-compete contracts, and unfair airline charges. There's more to do. We're going to keep pushing. Congressional Republicans stopped us from getting the $35 a month insulin out to every American and not just seniors. They forced the expanded child tax credit to expire, even though it was shown to cut child poverty almost in half, almost overnight. They stopped us from getting paid family leave for every American worker, but we won't give up and we won't back off. Just like we won't back off from insisting on a fairer tax code, not tax cuts for the wealthy. We won't back off on standing proudly with our unions and maintaining our infrastructure momentum. We won't back off in the face of those who want to use the latest culture war to distract or divide workers while they put shareholders first. And we won't back off on defending and extending the historic infrastructure and transportation work that we're doing coast to coast that so many of you are part of. What we're part of together with you on the front lines is about more than transportation. It's about more than policy. It's about a life worth living. I mentioned to you those kids I saw, those high school students in Wisconsin getting introduced to apprenticeships. And the more I reflect on that, the more I realize why what I saw there has stuck with me, why it was so moving. As those students were being shown the equipment that they could be working on, the projects that they could be building, and the income that they could be earning, I saw something change on their faces right then and there. I think you know what this is like too. At first I thought it was that they were looking at construction and infrastructure differently, and they were. But eventually I realized something else was happening that day. They were looking at themselves differently. They saw in a new way how they could thrive, how they could contribute, how they could belong, how they could make something important of their own lives as well as their careers. They saw their future in a whole new light. When you are a member of a union like SMART, you don't just come to understand things about the world or about the political system or about the economy or even about how to do a highly skilled and demanding job. You come to understand yourself and where you fit in the world and the value that you are bringing to your household and family, but also to your country's economy. A proud tradition that you are part of and your hand in building the future. You are shaping a future that your kids will be proud of, and we are building it together. And yes, with unions like SMART leading the way, there is no going back. You are closing the gap between what America is now and what America can be. That will be your legacy, and that will be the legacy of America's infrastructure decade. And the best is yet to come. So thank you for everything you're doing to help us build that future. Thank you for standing together in solidarity to get big things done. Let's get out there and keep doing that good work. Thanks very much. Appreciate you.
I don't know what's wrong with you young people. You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?